count in?
No, I'm not counting in. Oh God,
Okay,
we're
she's
recording.
not counting in, people. Hi, everyone. This is Katie and Katie from the Smart and Public podcast. We just wanted to start this episode with a note of clarification from us. We ummed and ahed about this episode a lot, but we thought it was definitely something we should do. But we did send it around to a few friends and people in the community just to get their thoughts. But we're really proud of it, and we do think it's an important conversation to have. But we just wanted to let everyone know that, and would welcome feedback once it's out. The second thing we wanted to just clarify is, there is a little bit of a fact check we need to do for this episode. We state in the episode that Salesforce had a board member step down. And actually, it was a board member from the Salesforce Foundation, which is slightly different, probably a nuance that not everyone understands, but just wanted to clarify that it was a board member from the Salesforce Foundation. And then lastly, I feel like this story is ever evolving. We recorded this last week and already there's new stuff. So this was a moment in time. We recorded our feelings in terms of the information that we had. There's obviously been a bunch of stuff since then, but you'll hear it and you'll make up your own minds. But hope you enjoy it. And we just wanted to kind of caveat it before we kick in. Enjoy.
Yeah, and can't wait to hear what you guys think. Please write us in, let us know your thoughts, and looking forward to sharing the episode with you. So I guess I'll just count us in now. In 5, 6, 7, 8. We're in. We're on. We're recording. We're amped, but for all of you just joining in, this is the Smart and Public podcast. This is a podcast that discusses life, advice, careers, all that through the eyes of comms professionals, marketers, and other kind of business executives. And today we're going to talk about what has been happening. First and foremostly, let me just say, Katie Duffy, to all of those who celebrate, happy last day of Dreamforce. To all of our friends. Blessed be to all of our friends that are flying in and working hard, and shout out to all of our PR team friends on the Salesforce team. We love you. And now we're going to talk about Marc Benioff.
Yes, we are. I feel like we need at least 17 caveats on this podcast. But maybe before we do our caveats, do you want to just give people the if they've been living under a rock, what's happened?
So here's what happened and what we were texting about earlier. So over the weekend, I believe it's like the eve of Dreamforce. Everyone, if we know our international friends or everyone from across the world, is like flying in. It's a time where everyone is starting to gather. We know that there's going to be some kind of like big opening articles that happens. We know Jim Cramer's flying in for Dreamforce. Like, we know the PR team has been working tirelessly around the clock to be able to make this the best event or tech event of the year. It always is. We always know how much coverage it drives. They do such a fabulous job. So respect, first of all. But what has come out of it and what people ended up seeing from somebody that is not in the Salesforce ecosystem at all anymore, the thing that I saw the most was the mention that Marc had in the article that we got that kicked all of this off in TechCrunch about Marc saying that if the National Guard needed to come in to clean up San Francisco and support the police, so be it. So this was done over an interview. Obviously, while Marc is on his plane, he had a comms person on the plane with him. And as he says that, he looks to his comms person on the record and says, "What, too spicy?" And as you can probably guess, the silence is deafening. The PR person was probably like giving him a look. And that is actually what made the article versus probably what what they were aiming to do at TechCrunch was talk about, here's what the future of, agentic Dreamforce or whatever the theme was that they did this year, and get ready to announce all of the news that was going to happen. So that ended up, I think, spiraling and kicking off a few different things that happened the rest of that week that we couldn't help but notice. And I think the rest of at least San Francisco residents, if not Salesforce employees, we definitely know Salesforce board members, and, just a conversation that happened because of those comments One, today you would have seen in the New York Times that a board member has stepped down because of the comments in a leaked email that they reported on in the article, because they, quote unquote, said that their values no longer aligned. We also saw the photo that David Sachs posted on Twitter.
And I think with all of this, what we want to do today is to talk about it at a kind of high level in terms of like founders, managing the comms with founders, the current environment we're operating in, particularly in the US with the administration and what that's sort of driving from behavior perspective. We're not necessarily here to like rip into Marc specifically and or the comms team at Salesforce. Like, we have deep respect for both. I think it's just, we felt like this was an obvious comms moment that happened this week. And as a comms podcast and ex-Salesforce people, it would be remiss of us to kind of ignore it and pretend it didn't happen. So we're going to try and tackle it from a really respectful place, but just sharing some of our ideas around what this is like to manage someone like that, and also the current environment and what behavior that is driving. And then as a comms person, like, what can you do about that? What should you do about that? How do you manage it? All of that sort of stuff. So we just like want to be super clear about that up front, that this isn't like a trash session. This is about what can we learn from this as a community. And just we felt it would be remiss not to do it. And our audience would be wondering why. So that's why we're doing it.
One thing that just continues to ring in the back of my mind when I think about this, Marc has always been a big personality, and love him or hate him, like what he says will spark conversations. But I'm starting to think, like, are we entering what I was talking to you about, of this Teflon founder era? And what I mean by that is, like, we're entering this phase where founders with sufficient market power have kind of learned that they can weather reputational storms that like would have absolutely destroyed them a decade ago, right? So for comms people, like, this creates a really, really tough position of you're managing reputation for someone who doesn't believe potentially that reputation matters anymore, because they think that, oh, it'll blow over, people will ignore it, or I can delete that tweet and no one will notice, or I can just post this other thing right after and show that I'm on both sides. Like, I think that is the one thing that I keep thinking about, is like, as a comms person, how are you managing this type of reputational situation?
Yeah. And I think it's an interesting one, because it's like they've now had a board member resign. So it's had an impact. I think as well, the thing I keep thinking about is audience, right? And so I think, and this is, I have no knowledge of this, I think that founders like Marc are trying to navigate how to appeal to, engage with, work with the current administration.
Right.
I think some of those founders have in the past been traditionally what you would call a little bit more on the left. And, Marc particularly has been a values-driven leader, has been very clear on positions around business of businesses to improve the state of the world, very supportive of San Francisco, the city, large donations to support the city and the homelessness problem in the city, all of that stuff traditionally. I think he's navigating a new world where, as a business, Salesforce needs to figure out how to work with the administration. They obviously have federal government clients, like all of that sort of stuff. I think we're seeing this with other founders too, right? Like Zuck's had a bit of a turn. Like there's a few. And I think that's not necessarily incorrect, that they need to figure out how to work with this administration and what does that mean and what do they need to do as part of that. I feel like maybe they are prioritizing that audience and that stakeholder over others. And I think what we saw play out with this is a prioritization of that audience.
Yeah.
And giving an opinion that appeals to that audience, forgetting that you have a large community, a large employee base, and even a customer base that doesn't necessarily resonate with that point of view and feels very strongly about the city. And I think that's what we saw play out, is this backlash from other audiences that Salesforce needs to care about around these comments. And I think that's the navigation for comms people, is like remembering multiple audiences, and thinking about how you navigate this new world. And it's interesting, like we just had Karina on the pod talking about climate, and she was saying, it's like changing language so that you're not, using the bad words, but it's not doing the thing that you need to do and I think that's it's just an interesting time right now. And I think, that's where we saw the backlash. But to your point, like, has it had a significant impact? Beyond maybe board member resigning is a fairly big impact, but reputation.
Does that matter to Mark at all? Like the fact that there hasn't been a statement from him or anything that's come out acknowledging that conversation. Like I can only speculate, obviously, of like what's happening in the background. Like maybe Mark is like, oh, I'm going to just talk to him and then we'll smooth it over. He'll come back. Or, maybe he's like, I don't need him. Like I've got David Sachs in my corner now. David's kind of taunting the media on Twitter about Mark fawning over him. We've got, the signaling of the photo of Mark kissing David is fascinating to me because it really signals like political realignment, whether Mark wanted that or not. Like that's what it says.
Yes.
And also, I feel bad for Mark if that was a photo that he didn't even know was going to go up on Twitter, and now it's there, and then you have to weigh up the conversation of, is it worse to take it down or is it worse to leave it up? And then you get into that kind of conversation and that balance. So I think it's tough when you're a comms person and your CEO has that much power. Because then it feels like the reputational kind of conversation that you would typically have around how are we building trust with our audience? How are we creating loyalty with our customers? You've got a really tough conversation on your hands and a tough job ahead of you.
Yeah, and you've got a tough job when, and we're seeing this with multiple founders, when they're weighing in on topics that really aren't theirs to weigh in on, but because of their political clout and their money, I think a lot of them feel they do have a voice in this, and National Guard is a good example, right? But I think the other piece of it from a comms perspective, I think it's okay. And in fact, it's perfectly fine for individuals to change their political views.
100%.
Right? So if that's what's occurred here, and there's a shifting in opinion and shifting of view and all of that stuff, that's fine. But you need to bring your audience along on that journey, because that hasn't been the position in the past. Now, not to necessarily to say that Mark's declared an allegiance to a particular party or anything like that. I think it's safe to say he's definitely had Democrats at Dreamforce. There's been a sense, I think, from the community that is where he sat. But, whether he did or not, that's up to him. But I think you've got to bring people along on the journey in terms of like where your perspective is now. Why do you think that's the case for San Francisco? What are you worried about? What keeps you up at night? And I think all of that stuff now, that's not to say he should still have a voice in that conversation. Like, I don't know if he should, it's particularly, Mark, I don't think lives there. But I just think that's probably where there's a bit of jarring in the Mark example, is I think the community feels a little bit let down that there's been a change in perspective, in viewpoint, and that I don't think they've done a great job, whether it's comms or Mark himself, on taking people on that journey as to where his head is at now.
I think the thing that keeps weighing in my head is if you are that comms person, like what you need to be doing is distinguishing market power from reputation and making sure that the leaders really understand the difference. So like regular comms would assume reputation like creates market power, right? But the new reality is sometimes market power makes reputation optional.
Yeah.
And so that is something that we need to work really closely with our leaders on to make sure that they know the difference between that if they do have that level of power.
And to your point, separate out when is it appropriate to weigh in. So, if this, for example, if you set up an interview specifically for Marc to talk as an individual, as a very wealthy individual who, sits in a state in America, and you want to talk about the state of America, right?
Yeah.
That's very different. That's Marc weighing in on things that, but I'm guessing this was set up as a Salesforce interview in the lead up to Dreamforce. That's
right.
That's how I'm imagining this is.
Mm-hmm.
So I think as a comms person, and you may not be able to do this, and this is probably a separate conversation about like how possible is it to steer these founders. But I would be saying, hey, like this is an interview about Dreamforce and about our technology and about where we're headed, and where possible, it should not be an interview that is about the state of America, geopolitical landscape.
Yeah.
City should be doing. That's very hard to separate. I get that because but I think you have to try. And then if he wants to be a commentator on broader geopolitical stuff or state stuff, then I think there's a forum for him to do that, and you can find avenues for him to do that. But I think it's hard when it gets tied in and influences the business. Now, that's very hard to do because he's still the CEO of the business. So it's very hard, but I just think they need to be thinking about that.
I have two kind of devil's advocates and want to get your opinion on that. So, well, they really are the same, but just positioned differently. So let me.
Love it.
One is like, as a spokesperson at a company, I recently was listening to a lecture where this guy was talking about how many CEOs actually would consider themselves entertainers, and they need to actually be considering themselves that. Your goal as a spokesperson or at the leader of a company is to make sure that people can digest what you say. And that is through storytelling. That is through being provocative. That is through entertaining people, right? Not just like delivering your product message or whatever. And I'm not talking about like everyone needs to have Huey Lewis in the news come up in the middle of their keynote entertaining. I mean, like you need to say things that people are going to latch onto and laugh at or have emotions about. And so kind of with that in mind, there's this whole idea of conquest communications, like where some companies will benefit from being seen as inevitable disruptors and like disrupting communicators. And that kind of is where Marc lies for me. Like everyone is like, he says the craziest stuff, but that's because he's a futurist. He's an innovator. He's, and at what point does that peak? Do you reach the summit of what that looks like and you go back down the other side because people are sick of it maybe, or it's actually something that's coming from having the wrong perspective because you're a billionaire or things like that. So that's the other thing is like, sure, he's entertaining. Like I think someone that's no longer in the world of having to think about what Marc says and how that impacts my market, like I can laugh at it, and it's a giggle. But what is the benefit of that now? Like words really, really matter more than ever. Can you be a conquest communicator?
I think you can. I think, and to your point, like Marc's never been shy to have an opinion. And I like that about Marc, I think. And I like founders and CEOs who do speak up. I think what's interesting as well is, when Marc was speaking up for LGBTQ rights and engaging with governors at different states when those things were going through, like a lot of people were really proud of that, right? A lot of people were really proud that he would stand up and say something publicly. I do find it interesting that when he says it from the other side, that, he kind of gets slammed for that.
That's such a good point, actually.
I do think that's interesting because I think Marc has not been a CEO that has not commented on political stuff, right? He always has. So this is not off-brand in terms of commenting in a political landscape. Like I said, I think it's the flip that I think people are struggling with a little bit, more than I think Marc has a brand that says, I'm going to speak up around government issues, right? Like for good or for bad, like that's what he does.
Yeah, like Indiana, where he threatened to shut down the Salesforce office.
Exactly.
Because
exactly. So like he has done that. And I do think as an employee base, there was a lot of pride about that. I think what's interesting is then, he has now been criticized for doing a similar thing in the sense that he's commenting on something that is, in the government agenda and he's having an opinion on it. I think because it sits on the other side.
But isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, but that goes back to your audience. Your audience expects you to sit on the other side. And so I think they're mad. I think they're mad but I do think that's a commentary as well around when is it okay to speak up on political stuff and when isn't it? I think people need to also ground themselves in the reality of doing business. And
I was just going to say that.
Yeah. But I will caveat that to say, I do think people see it as weak-willed when you have been one position in the past and you are now clearly another position. That's okay, but take people on that journey with you. And then I think you made a really good point about maybe being a little bit out of touch with reality. Mm-hmm. When you gush about being at a dinner at Windsor Castle, it's just a little bit and so that's the nature of where that world is at the moment, is you need a seat at that table to kind of navigate this administration and be successful with federal government and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. I really believe the comms challenge in this is navigating that change, navigating a change in a perceived, it might not even be true, but a perceived change in perspective and allegiance, right? Because I think people don't really understand that shift. And, Zuck's been criticized for this before too. He was not pro-Trump, and then now he's at every meeting and he's, gushing about him as well. So I think people don't like a flip. And I think unless you're going to kind of explain where you're sitting with that, then I think that's hard for people to get their heads around.
Yeah. I'm glancing over at my other screen because I'm looking at the Salesforce stock price, right? Listen, would I turn it away? No, it's up today. But it's interesting. I'm just trying to think about, the public will comment on his Twitter and bitch and moan, but also you have to think about, in this economy, what, are employees going to leave? No, they're not. And also the stock price is up and all these things that, I don't know, it's just interesting to me.
I don't disagree with you that I think in the long term, will this have a sustained long-term impact? Probably not.
As a comms person, you need to kind of think about, if your CEO decides that reputation doesn't matter for their business success, what is your role? I think that's the big question. I have three questions I would ask myself from 3 angles. Do you want to hear them?
Yes. Is this if you are the comms person for a founder?
Mm-hmm. What is my job? If I am the pragmatist, right? Mm-hmm. So my job is to help them understand which reputational damage matters and which doesn't. So I am a strategic advisor, not a moral guardian. So that's from a pragmatic view, right?
Yep. Love it.
Okay. Yeah. The traditionalist. My job is to protect long-term reputation, even if short-term business metrics say it's unnecessary. I am the institutional memory of the company. So that's the traditionalist. And then there's the exit strategy, which is, if my expertise is considered irrelevant, I need to find a CEO who values reputation management. So those are kind of
I love it.
A comms person, I need to pick one, pick a lane, and then just hunker down.
I love that framing. I think there's a fundamental question of how much do these founder CEOs and particularly once they've become incredibly successful and well off, how much influence can a comms person have? And that might be okay. That's to your point. That's kind of the pragmatism, is well, that might be okay. And the business can weather that. And my job is to go the layer down and really navigate the rest of the business and make sure the rest of the business is really solid, that we have great product news, that we have great spokespeople in other places.
But also that the team feels safe.
All of that stuff, right? That might be the decision. It also might be an exit strategy. If I really believe that this is not doable and that doesn't sit with me right, then maybe that's not the place for you as a comms person. And I think for a lot of people, being that CEO, founder, comms person is not a desirable job. That's a hard job.
Oh my God.
You know? So like I think that's a very reasonable question to ask. And then I think there's the change agent of like, can I actually move the needle on this one? And am I going to give it a crack?
Is it a fight I want to fight?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, all of that stuff,
does the
right?
fight impact the business
Yeah,
positively, or am I just personally mad about it? Like, that's the other thing you've got to separate.
yeah. And I think you're right. Go back to the business, go back to what you've been hired to do around specifically for the business, not for the individual. Um, and then try and think about, you know, what that looks like. I think the only other thing I would say is like, I don't know exactly how it went down, but I got the impression that the comment to the PR person was like, as he was like finishing and hanging up. Um,
Oh, I thought he like
I
stopped
don't
after
know.
his
I don't
comment.
know. But that's the way I read it, and I could be wrong. But then that was going to be my only other point was like, we say this all the time, but like the mic is never off. Like double, triple check. Like this has happened to so many people. This is not just a Mark thing. Like
No.
people on TV where they're mic'd up and they don't realize they're mic'd up.
Yeah.
And so I just as a like, comms reminder, the mic is never off. Like make sure you've hung up, all that sort of stuff. But also like, you know, if he genuinely thought he'd hung up, like
Mm-hmm.
to some extent he was validate, like he was checking because he kind of knew maybe he'd gone a little bit where he shouldn't have gone because he was kind of saying like, what was it too spicy? Which I really enjoy the wording of that as well. But I think, yeah, I just wanted to caveat that to say like, the mic is never off, but also like, maybe it was a heat of the moment and that happens. He's in the middle of doing 17 other things. He's on the way from somewhere else. Um, it's possible that it went too far just accidentally as well.
Yeah. I don't know. I just think in this day and age, like reputation is insurance. It establishes trust, it establishes loyalty. And if your CEO can't do that, you've got a big challenge ahead of you for the rest of the company to be able to establish it without him. But that doesn't mean it can't be done. It just means that it's a similar battle that we saw with Linda at X with Elon, like if that's the direction you want to go to. And maybe it's some of those examples of like, I mean, Tesla's stock, I think, is killing it again, but like, maybe it doesn't fucking matter. No one's stock is going down. So.
No, but I would say like, as comms people, like, I always believe in like building your bench. So like, have other really solid people who maybe are a counter to your CEO and founder, like whether that's a personality balance or a viewpoint balance or whatever the counter is that you need. I mean, for some people, it's not even that. For some people, it's like you might have a founder CEO who's like super smart and super bright, but is like a little too like bright and smart.
Right.
And like, kind of can't get into the bigger picture or can't kind of, so you might have a really good strategist or big picture thinker who you want to then have do those kind of things. So then you can have your founder be really technical or really like appeal to the engineering community, whatever it might be, right?
Great point. Yeah.
Like I think you got to kind of look at your bench and go, how do we as a brand kind of make sure that we're represented in multiple ways? Like I would say just have a think about that as a whole. I think the CEO founder and particularly CEO founder who's been very successful and is now very wealthy is an asset and a curse. And that's the reality. I think. If you look at all of them, like the main ones at the moment, they are incredibly influential. What they say matters. They're very intelligent people. They wouldn't be there if they wouldn't have got to where they are without that. But sometimes I think money and power give you permission to do things that you wouldn't normally do. And as a comms team in a business, that's very hard. Because you are going to comment on things and you are going to be at events like Windsor Castle and you are going to be like, that's not anything to do with Salesforce necessarily. Like, I think he's in that room for more than just Salesforce. He's in that room because he's a powerful billionaire in the US.
Of course. Right? Of course. So, and you want to be at that table. If I were Mark, I would want to be at that table and considered, the powerful executive from a powerful company that I've spent my entire life building. And, I think there's a bit of ego in there as well, which, I would absolutely have if I were him.
I I'd like to think I wouldn't, but you probably would.
Oh, I
think
know that if I ever got that much power, I'd be a nightmare. I'd be an absolute fucking
let's
nightmare.
never give Katie Boyson that
No,
power.
no, never hand me a
Um,
B, a
I'm
billion.
trying to think of like other tips. My other tip would be sometimes these CEOs and founders have what I would call a whisperer in the business.
Yeah.
Like someone who like they really do listen to and they really value their opinion.
Yes.
And sometimes that person is actually your best friend as the comms person. Like that's how you influence is not actually you directly, but via the whisperer.
Hmm.
And so if you can build a relationship with the whisperer who where like you guys are on the same page, you get it, and you're both like, okay, here's what then that's sometimes the avenue. And that can feel funny that you're not directly, but that's been my experience is I feel like find that person and become friends with that person. And I mean like get them aligned to your messaging and all that sort of stuff. And then it's a two-pronged approach. That doesn't mean you're not still in the room, but you've got this other person who's bought in and is kind of like that would be my other like advice.
And that whisperer might not be a comms person.
Oh no, I often think
They
they
might
are.
be a chief of staff. They might be, like
Another exec.
head of product,
Yep.
like something like that.
Yep.
I am laughing because I am wondering if there are any like founders or non-comms people or non-marketers, because I feel like marketers would be familiar with like the whisperer term. Like, have we just unleashed an industry secret of like the CEO whisperer, the exec whisperer, and like
Surely people know that exists,
like
right?
does Mark know that there's a Mark whisperer?
I mean, I'm sure he doesn't. I mean, I'm sure he does actually, probably. But maybe they don't even know. Like sometimes I'm like they don't necessarily, but they've just built a trusted, good relationship. And I actually think comms people are really good at finding the whisperers.
True. Maybe the whisperer doesn't even know that's their title.
No, and
Yeah.
maybe you're not even making that clear to them that that's how you're leveraging them.
Mm-hmm.
You're just building a relationship that means they're across your work. Because
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's more about like in the room, is there a sponsor for what you're saying?
That's true.
Because
And
you might not
everyone
be
knows
enough,
that. Yeah.
Especially when a lot of these founders and CEOs are actually great marketers and great storytellers and ultimately quite good comms people. Sometimes I feel like that's where the disconnect with comms comes is because it's their story. It is their story. Like it is their business. It's their story. Very different to when you bring in a CEO
Yes.
who is there to drive revenue, but is not the founder, is not, that's very different. And I think that's what we're talking about today is not that necessarily, although you can still have those rogue people.
Dude, anyone can go rogue.
Yeah. So I think what we're talking about today is where you've got, so I think that's where like someone in the room who you've pre-seeded what you think is the plan, so that then when the plan is revealed, you've got someone in the room who that CEO founder trusts, sort of validating your plan.
Yeah.
My
Here's
hot
what
tip.
I'm kind of thinking on like I wrote down my 4 closing thoughts for us
Please
to
share.
discuss. How are you
I
feeling
love how
about
structured you are today. I'm so glad one of us is prepared.
it? 1, your CEO might be right. So that's a hot take. So the most uncomfortable thing about this is that if they have enough market power, reputation might actually be optional. So as a comms person weighing up, like, are they delusional? Or is this actually something that's like gonna, doesn't matter. Are they right? Is your CEO right?
Yeah, or do they have a right to have that conversation?
Number 2 is conquest over consequence is a strategy, not a failure. So the concept behind that is stop treating these situations as PR failures. They might be PR strategies you don't agree with, but they are working.
Ooh.
So that's the second one. 3.
Okay.
The new comms role is power analyst, not sentiment manager. So,
Oh, what do you mean by that?
yeah, so your value isn't managing what people think about the company or the executive anymore. It's understanding which stakeholders have the actual power to impact the business. So really it's about the bench. It's about thinking about who needs to say what, and then just like let the swirl.
Interesting.
And then the last hot take I have is in spirit of like 30 Rock is the talk low, say no, let her go. That's Jack Donaghy talking about his mother and managing his mother. But really, it's like knowing when to walk away. Like your job is
Yeah.
not valued and you can't
Yeah.
change. Yeah.
Yeah, and only you'll know that, and only the people in the room know that, and then by the way, with all of this, only the people in the room know what went down. Like, and so yeah, I think my hot take is like if you have a CEO founder who has changed position, perceived position, whether they have or they haven't, maybe they've been this way the whole time behind closed doors, who knows? But if they have a perceived change of position, I think you need to think about how you bring the audience along on that journey. Now, that audience might only be your internal audience. Like it might need to do it externally. But I think that is important. And I think that is where, in this example, some of this backlash is coming from. I actually don't think it's about, I think some of it is what he said in terms of the San Francisco based community. Like, I think there's an element of like specifically what he talked about. But like I said, Mark's always commented on political stuff. So that shouldn't be the issue. I think what people are mad about is they can't understand what they think is a flip in values, in opinion,
Yeah.
in political leaning. It's perception. Whether that's reality, it doesn't really, like, we don't know. And maybe the first part of what Mark did and believed in was not necessarily, like, who knows? But I think as a comms team, you've got to recognize that there was a position and a values and all of those things that there's a perception that has changed.
Yeah.
So that's one challenge. I think the other hot take is like kind of to your point about reputation and power. At a certain point, making a call and a decision on, will this have a long-term impact on our business? Are we going to be able to change it in the future? And I think in this example, the answer is probably like, no. Like, I don't think it's going to have a long-term reputational and or financial impact on their business. And by the way, it might have a positive one from a federal government spend point of view. So keep that in mind. Like, you've got to look at the finances on both sides. Like, maybe there'll be some impact from a stock perspective. Sounds like there hasn't been. And then I think the question in this case is like, is that style, that community, is that going to change for this person? I don't think so. He's been that way a long time.
Yeah.
So then the answer is where you landed, which is like, if you're good with that and you think you can still drive the business forward and do a great job and all of that stuff, great. If that's not the comms person you want to be and that's not the founder you want to work for, then great. That's your answer. And this applies across all businesses, I think. It's like trying to figure out that balance of like my worth and my value and where I contribute and where I don't contribute and what I can control and what I can't control. And, remembering that you fundamentally work for the business and driving the business forward. And so you have multiple stakeholders within that, and there's lots of good you can do as part of that, right?
Yep.
Side note, Dreamforce looked like it was a great Dreamforce, I will say.
I get FOMO every time it comes around and I'm not there. So
yeah. And I still have lots of friends who are there this week. So shout out, have a good rest, everybody, after this week. But yeah, I did, similar to what we always say when we talk about these issues, is like your first thought is like
the PR team.
Tough day.
Oh, when you see PR in the headline too, you're
like, I know. And like a comment on, that's always not nice. And like,
I always feel sad when I see that.
Well, also it's almost said like in a dirty way that the PR person was there. That's what annoys me. It's like in this day and age, companies should have comms people. We are not a dirty profession. Like, we're not like, and so the way it was written was kind of like, oh, and then his PR person sitting there with you. I'm like, yeah, of course she was.
Or she's always going to be there. Yeah. Or he.
Yeah. He or she. But like, of course. And so that annoys me sometimes when journalists write that as if it's like a dirty thing that the CEO and founder of one of the world's largest businesses had their PR person there. Of course they did. Yeah. Let's just lose that out of the equation. Of course.
I get stuffed. Like, of course.
Of course. So yeah, just an
amateur hour.
Journos listening, like, we're going to be there.
Oh my God, I love it.
Okay. Did we do okay? I don't know.
I listen. I feel like anyone that's listening to this that's on the Salesforce PR team knows that we adore them.
Yeah, love them.
And hopefully, we got to say some things that they probably don't get to say. So
that's fair too. Yeah, that's fair. I think when you're in it, it's obviously it's hard, and you probably have thoughts and you probably have feelings, and we are a safe place. We can say it now. I think we've been gone long enough that they don't care. Yeah.
Okay, like, listen, we've got a lot of really exciting interviews coming up on the
Yes.
podcast. We have some really fun topics that we're covering. We're also we won't always be, just as a heads up to the listeners, like, we're going to have some moments where there's weeks where we do not have an episode in this season because Duffy and I are doing a lot of traveling, which makes it hard. So just a heads up, it'll be a little bit inconsistent, but we already have interviews and our episodes are planned all the way through the end of the year. So like, just know that they're coming.
They're coming. And I think we've surpassed 50 episodes now, Katie Boyson.
Is this number 50? No, this is...
Or are we close?
This is 49. I know. This is number 49. I'm looking.
I knew we were close.
Hold on. Let me look at that. This is our 50th episode.
I knew it.
Oh my God.
I knew it. I looked the other day and I was like, I'm sure it is. Well, happy 50th, Katie Boyson.
50th. Oh my God. That's
50
amazing.
and fabulous, babe.
50 and fabulous is going to be the name of this episode for sure.
Yeah, love it.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for listening to us for 50 episodes. And if you have a idea for a topic or a guest suggestion or anything like that, like, we are here at hello@smartandpublicpod.com, or you can just find us on our socials. We're on LinkedIn, TikTok, all that with Smart and Public Pod. So yeah, congratulations to us.
Yay us. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, love you. Bye.
Bye.